Order. I'm going to ask for everyone to raise or to stand for a moment of brief silence in memory of a student from Portsmouth who died while on a band trip to Disney World. I don't really know any of the details, but certainly our fellow community is dealing with a grave loss right now. Thank you. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So welcome to this special Tiverton School Committee meeting to discuss our fiscal year 20 budget. I believe Mrs. Palish would like to make a few opening comments. Ms. Palish?
So I just, before Peter got into the detail, I just sort of wanted to frame the questions just in a real big, broad terms. So we're in a situation where the budget that we put forth doesn't cover the expenses that we have. So yes, we have savings, but not unlike our own mortgages. If you use your savings to pay your mortgage, now your mortgage stays and your savings go away. So sort of the task for us tonight, and I guess tonight and next week, is how do we see our way through this? Do we start cutting expenses now, knowing that the revenue is going to go away? Do we sort of just use our savings and say, hey, we'll figure it out next year? Do we do a combination of using part of our savings and going back and putting forth an alternate budget and asking for the additional $500,000 that'll get us part of the way but not the whole way? So that's kind of how I see it, is we really just, because the kids, we're their voice. They have no vote, no voice. We're their voice. So just sort of working through that of what's the direction is, you know, we kind of have those three choices, and, you know, I hope just a real free, open discussion of, you know, what we do to get where we need to be. But the gist of it is we have a budget that doesn't, you know, the budget doesn't cover the expenses that we have, so.
Okay, thank you. I mean, just to add to that, you know, we want this to be sort of a discussion with the community as well. So we're the advocates for our students and for our families and for our citizens, but we also want to hear from parents, teachers, you know, other members of the community, sort of what they think should happen. Certainly a couple years ago in 2015, we had some unexpected shortfalls actually after the budget, and people were sort of surprised when we suddenly had to make some cuts because we both had a petitioner's budget that passed that reduced the school budget by about $127,000, and then almost, you know, instantaneously after the ballots were counted, we wound up getting hit with some healthcare costs and transportation costs, and there was something else, insurance, I think, of some other sort, that really put us behind the eight ball financially. And of course, budgets are sort of fluid in many regards. Costs are, you know, always changing. So with that, unless anybody else, any other member of the committee wants to make a comment, I'll turn it over to, seeing none, Dr. Sanchioni.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the school committee. So I'm going to show you some slides to illuminate the point Ms. Palish was making about a budget that's currently being funded below what our costs are, which is going to cause the school committee to make some tough decisions on using one-time revenue. I've taken the historical chart that you've seen here in the past and added in the results of last Thursday's budget committee meeting, where you see the last line, a budget that's been recommended of $31,442,700. It's about almost a 4% increase, but the largest portion of that increase comes from state aid. The town increase is 1.84%. And so the result of that has already been said, is that the budget we submitted, the 31,947,000, again, I want to remind the committee that that budget did not have any new staff in it. That was a budget that had already been reduced. So the budget that was approved now leaves a delta of a negative 505,020. So there needs to be, in the budget that you've recommended that we submit, we need to cut that by almost $500,000. So it's some strategy that we have to do there. But beyond that, the real impact is that even with that cut, or even, let me say this differently, even if the $31.9 million budget was funded at our full request, we were still going to need to use one-time money to balance. And so I want to bring that point out here. So here it is here, and it's two major categories. And you could apply the delta to any of our categories in our budget, but these are the ones that were underfunded. So our Newport County assessment came in this year at about, if I use round numbers, about 1.8 million, and we had budgeted 1.3 million. So the decision was to use 478,000 from the fund balance. That would balance us there, but it's that fund balance amount, again, is one-time money. Our out-of-district placements...
So just, Dr. Sanquioni, so just in case anyone doesn't understand what that term, that NCC assessment, that is all the special education costs in-house. So all the IEPs, all the aids, all the, sort of things that we spend on special education, either housed in our schools or sort of occasionally within the 3 districts that are part of the collaborative. Sorry.
No, great explanation. OT, PT, speech, all those services are included in there. And then the second area is our out-of-district placements, where our projected tuitions are 2.5, almost 2.6 million. We budgeted 1.2 million. We can use 600,000 from the IDA grant, which is typically funded at about 300,000 a year. We had some carryover, one-time carryover money, and so that's what I want to highlight this, that even though we'll apply 600,000 to balance this account, 300,000 that is one-time money. You can't count on 600,000 a year. You can count on $300,000 a year, which again requires us to dip into Medicaid at 496,000 and to again go to the fund balance for 200,000. So if I take all the numbers in red, this is the point that's very important to make this evening. Even with this budget, at our budget request of 31.9 million, that was funded. We're still using $1.4 million of one-time revenue. So that 500,000 just makes that delta, that difference much deeper.
Well, and that was the point, is when we built our we found this out after we built our budget.
Correct. We found that out yeah.
So, and just to gloss that, so there's been a lot of discussion about out-of-district placements and how they have changed, and what that impact has been on the budget. If we go back to 2015, we had approximately 45 out-of-district placements. Subsequently, it was 38, 45, 46, and this year it is 51. Now, there's been a lot of discussion in the community about 20 new out-of-district placements or 12 new out-of-district placements. That represents the flux. So while there may have been somewhere between 15 and 20 new out-of-district placements, there were also 15 or some number of students left the district. So we are now at about 51 out-of-district placements, and that has represented about a $500,000 increase in our overall costs. And it's notable to point out that our average out-of-district placements in 2015 ran at about $32,600 per out-of-district placement. It is now $54,700, according to my math. I'm sorry, 46,900 is the average of our out-of-district placement costs. So that's an increase of about $14,000.
So just to reiterate, the 31,947,000 number that we put before the budget committee did not include this $1.4 million shortfall that we knew about.
Right.
This is on top of that.
Right. And I think the key point, and thank you for mentioning that, Ms. Palish, is that the budget committee asked the school committee to use some of your revenue toward our budget, and you'd already done that, and somehow that just didn't get recognized on Thursday evening. You made some decisions to use a lot of money to cover the deficit and as a result of that, it still was underfunded.
Well, that was actually a very deliberate decision last year when we built the budget, was to use some money from the fund balance in order, because we had been running favorability over several fiscal years. We did not run that favorability this year. So, you know, a lot of has been made of the fact that that was our choice. That was a choice we made in response to concerns on the part of the other governing bodies of the town, as well as, you know, citizen taxpayers, as well as some expectation that the fiscal condition of the town was going to improve in the short term over the next 12 to 24 months last year, over the subsequent 12 to 24 months because of casino revenue.
Well said. So I want to show now, again, if I call your attention to the key terms up there, fund balance and Medicaid, using funds to balance the FY19 budget, using funds from these accounts to balance the FY20 budget now. I want to show you where these accounts are going to end up at the end of FY20. So we'll start with Medicaid. As we sit here today, it's
So this is the money held at the region.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's built up by about $100,000 a year since the mid-1990s.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
So as we stand today, it's about 1.8 million, almost 1.9. As you've already made a decision, we need to balance FY19 to the tune of 1.4 million. So that leaves on July 1st about 447,000 left. We can plan on with confidence to increase that budget by about 300,000, which means there'll be 747,596 in that account. To balance FY20, you're going to need to take almost $500,000 from there. So on July 1st of 20, as you with calculating the FY21 budget, funds that you've used to balance the last 2 years to high amounts, you're only going to have about 251,000 left, but 160,000 of that is always committed to the collaborative. So there's, you know, what has held the FY19 and 20 budget together, that revenue stream is just no longer going to be there.
How large would the structural deficit be at that point?
You can count on it over $1 million.
Yep.
So you would you would need to really bake in about a 3% increase up front in the overall budget in order to account
Just
for that
to balance.
structural deficit.
Yeah.
So structural deficit being when you use one-time revenue to pay for recurring costs. So those recurring costs, of course, don't go away. So you would,
my mortgage is 1 million and my savings are now gone and I have to.
and I still have to pay the $1
I
million.
still have to pay the 1 million.
So we would have a 3% increase in the FY21 budget
Just to
just
get
to
us.
cover
Yes.
increased. So to cover two things. You know, one was special education funding that we took from the fund balance last year, and the second is unanticipated
Yep.
rises in special education.
Yep.
Okay.
So I wish the picture got a little rosier, so to say, but again, you've used fund balance money also to make up these deficits. So as we sit here today, it's about 1.2 million, at least I thought it was, but now I provided you a new document on your table. Ms. Pallas sent this to me, I don't know, maybe around 4 o'clock today. And so these presentations and copies were already made. So if I ask you just to look at that 1.2 million up there and just now transpose that to 983,890. And so note that 983,000, none of that is needed to balance FY19. You're balancing FY19 using Medicaid money.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the previous slides I've shown you, you need to use fund balance money to balance FY20 to the tune of 678,000. So the delta now, what I was showing up here was 583. It's actually now 305,835.
I did quickly before we move on. Oh, you have it there, the 583.
Yeah, well, that's based upon the 1.2 million. So
Yeah.
it's 305,835 based on the top number being 983,890.
So if you look at this fund balance, you will note there's about 584,000 in the committed that hasn't been spent yet that we could unfreeze on the bottom, the very bottom of this, 584. Everybody see that? On the very bottom of this fund balance roll forward? On the very bottom, there's 583,599 that we could unfreeze and uncommit, but then the kind of things we won't be doing if we do that is fire and safety doors, security camera upgrades, access road, exterior doors, gym dividers, classroom dividers, water fountains. So we can uncommit that and we can freeze it to cover future, basically spending. But we just have to understand that's a choice then to not do those other things.
Well, Mrs. Plash, I am of the thought that until we get to the end of this fiscal year and have a real clear picture of where we land from operations in fiscal 19, that we do indeed do that, that any funds that have not already been spent or contracted from that fund balance, whether it be from committed or uncommitted, that we freeze until we can reevaluate after the end of this fiscal year.
And I mean, we can do it. Right now, it's committed, so right now, we don't have to do anything.
Committed doesn't mean contracted.
No.
And what I'd like to do is just kind of pause.
Right.
Okay. Well, we can get to that
Yeah.
at some point.
Okay, so fund balance is
Fund balance is
gone.
depleted. And then the last thing, on a more positive venue, again, with gratitude, we're appreciative of the decision to fund the school's capital request of $311,000. These are the items that were approved last Thursday evening, and you can see they're pretty important items for both safety and security at our school system. And the top four are all reimbursable by RIDE at 35%, so that means the town will receive back about $108,000. As you know, the reimbursement goes directly to the town, so their investment of $311 actually returns a net back to them of about $108.
I'm wondering if the Budget Committee has taken that into account.
No, I was wondering that myself.
Probably not.
That's not the only one, there's others.
Of this year, right?
Well, all of the bonded work that we did.
No, but the ones that we took out of fund balance, that's different.
Yeah, no, well, there's been,
Yeah.
I don't know if Ms. Sorette could actually tell us exactly what's been received from RIDE in the last 5 years. That'd actually be a pretty important question to ask, because we've had a number of allocations over the last 2 to 3 years that should have been reimbursed directly to the town, yeah.
So that brings us back to,
Where we are.
now what? So,
One other thing to focus on as well, we're projected to receive an increase in state aid this year of $776,000. That is much higher than what we traditionally have seen for increases.
yeah.
I don't have a level of confidence that that will happen again, and perhaps have it turn the other way in fiscal '21, so we kind of have to keep that in mind. I think it's probably more
It
likely than
averages
not.
around 300,000.
Yeah,
It was
this is-
incredibly high this year. I don't know why.
That is always possible, right.
We can have a raise for the governor every year and a pro-education governor. It's
Yeah.
always a good item to raise revenue for schools. It doesn't happen every year, as you
It's
already
just not
articulated.
something we can count on.
So-
Well, and that's what I mean, the budget is always, you'd think it's not, it's dollars and cents. It should be relatively concrete, but it is actually pretty fluid.
So Peter, just from because I don't want to, scare anyone. I don't want to threaten that we're going to do this or do that. So just from a program, just from an educational standpoint, how would you even start? So 2021, next year we're here, we have a $1.4 million deficit that we have to close, either through asking for an increase or some other way. How do you even, what would you do? How would you even start looking at that as far as trying to narrow in on savings or cuts or Like, where does that even start?
Well, the first place you always turn is, what's the available revenue that you can apply here? So I guess I would start there and look at every possible account. I mean, you see where the fund balance and Medicaid are going to be, but I would also look at every other account that the school department has, access to, which isn't much. I mean, most of that is all restricted funds, whether it's Title I or federal aid for special education or things like that. From there, I mean, the cut process is, you just kind of do reverse order, and you start with everything that's non-personnel. So again, you start with making cuts to your curriculum accounts, your professional development accounts, your technology accounts, all your school expense accounts. But again, remind you that 80% of our budget's staff. So when you're asking me to cut 20% of it, there's not a lot of room to cut there in the first place, and then you have nothing left to turn to but personnel. So you've already brought the point out that if you look at this budget that's up here now, and I brought it back, if that $31,442,000 is the actual budget that remains, and we know that, by state law that it only can be increased by 4% next year, that 4% is not going to even come close to covering the gap. So it leaves you in a predicament to say to the town, will you be willing to go beyond the 4%? Or if the answer to that is no, then we work as a team to figure out, okay, what I just articulated to you, how we're going to make cuts.
So the $500,000 that was cut at the budget committee meeting, that would at least get us part of the way there.
Absolutely, and it would increase that bottom line so that the 4% next year would be higher if the $500,000 was on the bottom line this year, which again gets us closer. But even with the 4% next year, it's not going to close the gap. It's just, this has been a reoccurring budget or deficit in 3 operating budgets.
And so roughly, I think we did the math, it's about $1 million that we could get, assuming we even asked for it and got it, it's about $1 million. So then the rest would have to come from other sources, state aid, which we don't know what is.
Right.
Okay. So then that's the question. Do we say, well, you know what, we really need to start looking at this now and start making some hard decisions now? Or do we say, well, let's use our fund balance, let's use our savings, let's figure it out next year? Or, do we do both? Do we, let's try for an alternate budget, let's try to get that extra 500, use our fund balance, and then at least that gets us part of the way there, and then next year we reassess? I mean, what are people thinking? Parents? Anybody have any questions about any of the numbers? I know, Sandy, you had some. No? Okay. Anybody?
I would think we're going to have to address the fund balance that we've been dealing with for the last 3 years. As long as there's a fund balance, we're going to continue to do this. And if we cut programs now and keep a fund balance, we're going to have to continue to keep cutting. So at some point, and it was mentioned at the budget committee meeting, I don't know how many years ago, we had an 11% increase one time because of this.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to have to, the town is going to have to catch up with all this underfunded budgets, and we're going to see a 10% increase in the town, similar to what we did in the early 2000s. But if we keep a fund balance, we're going to continue this type of budgeting forever.
You mean if we keep using these one-time revenue sources and creating these?
I think we have to use our fund balance to get through so we don't have any fund balance left.
Because you feel like it's hurting us because when we have it, people don't want to fund this.
Correct.
It does. It hurts us in the court of public opinion. However, there was a decision made
in 2012.
for the schools to take over their capital spending. And indeed, we've used that fund balance to make a number of investments directly toward education. Most of the electronics you see around this school came from that fund balance. Certainly these wonderful lights and ceilings that everyone always talks about came from that fund balance. And it was a purposeful decision, as you mentioned, in 2012. It does, again, we're always dinged for it because we do continue to have that balance. And I think that there's a sentiment that says, okay, drain it down to nothing And then when you're down to nothing, then lay off half your staff, because we're still not going to give you anything.
Well, and if that's the case, we're going to do the same thing this year. If we lay off some people, because like the superintendent said, Dr. Sanquioni said, this is going to come from personnel. There's no other place in our budgets. You know, we still have to have paper and copiers just to operate on a daily basis. So if we're going to make, even to make this $500,000 cut, this is going to come from personnel.
Go back to that chart, the historical.
And before I do it, to
Oh,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Cabral's point,
Yep.
on July 1st of 20, when you're planning the FY '21 budget, I mean, that's the predicted balance right there, 583. I mean, in essence, that is zero. And you see I put the little asterisk there, barring no unforeseen circumstances. If we get hit with a couple tuitions during next school year, that is going to be zero. But
Agree.
you carrying that amount of money is basically zero in a school system, because you're always going to have, whether it's legal or special education, there's something that comes up during the year. And because our operating budget is so tight, it can't handle any overages. You need some place to turn to. So, you know, mission accomplished. It's not a place to really turn to anymore.
I think the rule of thumb has always been about 3%.
Right.
Yeah,
At some point, our emergency turn to is going to have to be the 3% that the town keeps.
maybe, yeah.
Well, that's theoretically what it's for, and you know, we've talked about that in this committee as well, that keeping the fund balance insulates the town from us coming to ask them those questions, even though
And that's
they still
happened-
have to keep the money in the bank, so maybe it doesn't really benefit them that much.
That's happened many times over the past few years, right back to the septic system. You know, we funded that, and it all goes back to the lawsuit. You know, that's where all this foolishness started.
Well, that's where the fund balance started, actually,
Right, but
was
that's when it all
when
started.
that
That's
money
when
came
they
back
that's
to the
when they
schools.
stopped.
Yeah.
Their solution to it is, okay, we're going to stop giving the school department capital money.
So I do want to make the point, only because I think it's important to make. While we were building our fund balance, and while we were building it and spending it on capital or saving it to spend on capital, we weren't building it through passing that on to the taxpayers. We were building it through other savings, through state aid, through other one-time drawdowns, to the point where I know we've had
Very
this
tight budgets.
conversation, Dr. Sanquioni, is you felt we really were too conservative in
Well, when you evaluate the needs of the district, I
yeah,
think
exactly.
it could
No,
have been
we've had this discussion that
used
you
to
that perhaps you would have, you know, hindsight is 20/20, but in the desire to build up a capital fund, certainly we see what happened to the operating side.
Dr. Lock?
Yes, Mrs. Black.
So, everyone's talking about, it's true, the fund balance did start the year, the town council voted to take away our fund balance. They came out at midnight, I was sitting there, and they voted to take our fund balance, and I was like, what? And then, of course, we started with the lawyers and the courts, both sides. The second year, they came out again, and they took that year's fund balance away. And that's the one that really hurt, because everyone knew by then, they knew the story, they know it has to stay in education and everything else. So that was 2 years of fund balance, up to almost $600,000. I won't say exact numbers, because I'll get dinged, but around that number was taken away, and that, we had to keep it in there. We couldn't spend it, because we didn't know what was going to happen. So it went to the Board of Regents, it went to Department of Education, it went to Superior Court, it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, give that money back. That's not your money. That belongs to the schools. So at that point, we had almost $600,000 right there. And then we have the septic system. We've talked about that many times. We knew we were going to have to fix it. We were putting money away all the time, like we said, freezing things and being responsible. And one night we were sitting here, and we had almost $300,000, and a member of the school committee said, she had spoken to DEM that day, and that we were lying. We did not need that much money for that septic system. So I checked again, asked around to the people that knew. They said, you're going to need more than that. In the end, it was over $600, almost to $700 with all the legal fees. We were being fined by DEM all this time. That at the end, they took away those fines because we got everything done the way they wanted. So there was another, as Mr. Cabral says. Now, I'm a geek. I watch Channel 18 all the time. I watch a lot of the other districts. And what I see about this time of year, what do? They come to their city councils and their town councils and they say, we ran out of money. We need $600,000. We need and I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness. And we need $700,000. And they tell them why, and they all raise their hand and they get it. We've never done that. We've never come to, one year, in fact, and Mrs. DiMedeiros will remember this, we made an agreement with the budget committee just before the meeting. We used to have a meeting and try to come together and scrub the budget. And they said, take $100,000 off yours and we'll see how things work out. And if things work out during the year, we'll give it back to you. So we all made that agreement in front of the whole town. Well, here it comes. Every other month, Mrs. DiMedeiros was president. She'd come before the council and say, how are we doing? Are we going to get that $100,000? We really need that. And in the end, they voted. We would have to have a special town meeting to get that $100,000. We were on our phone trying to get 301 people to show up to vote for that money. We did get them, but those are the things that have happened in the town. As I said the other night, we've been extremely responsible. The teachers, Council 94, the administrators, we sat across the table from them and said, we're having a difficult time. Everybody is, and we can't give you the raise that you want. And we have to increase your health care. We all know the story. And they said yes, and they said yes year after year. And then finally, when we became the highest paying copay and one of the lowest in the state, when you call Rhode Island Association of School Committees and we're at the bottom, we start losing teachers. Why wouldn't you drive across the bridge for $10,000 more, a young couple with babies and everything? So then we said, no, we really have to come together and give the teachers and everybody else and try to bring them up towards the middle. We don't want to be on the top, of course not, but at least towards the middle. And that's what we tried to do this year. And it's amazing the comments we're getting just because we tried to do that.
So Sally, do you think we should go for the alternate budget or just use our fund balance? What are you thinking?
So this is what I think. I think that don't even talk about casino money. Talk about the growth of the town. We've all been waiting for the town to grow. Every year we'd ask, what's the growth this year? What does mean people pay taxes for their services? And it was like a 0.5% all the time. And I'd say to the tax assessor, what are you talking about? All these beautiful homes, $400,000, $500,000. Oh, that's prorated. I said, no, it's not. There's swings, there's pools. Finally, he came over to me this year. He says, Sally, we have the growth. With not counting the casino, we have growth in this town, which is money that taxpayers have paid for their services. So as Dr. Sanchioni had presented the other night, I think this is the year where the townspeople won't be hurt. Because when I stand at CVS in line for my husband's medication and I see people that can't afford it, believe me, I'm looking right in their eyes and going, we never want to hurt you. We don't want to hurt you how old you are. If you're infants to the elderly, we're here for everyone.
Well, and clearly we weren't.
But I mean, every year we've been so responsible.
Look at the chart.
And from the local side, and we showed it the other night, and some people were shocked. They called me up, they said, people are sitting next to me going, no, that can't be. I said, no, that's what we've been doing consciously. And that's why when they say we didn't ask for anything last year, no, because we had the fund balance announced to us. And so, like I said to someone, if I had $100 in my pocket and I said, can I borrow $1? You'd go, what's the matter with you? You've got $100 in your pocket, as Mr. Cabral said. We've been very reasonable, not asking, and this year I think is the year when we can really go out and ask the town for that $500 that we know we need. And I would be able to look at anybody and say, please, we've done what we can all these years. Can you please help us now? Because we want to make this school system, as we say, go from good to great. And I know we can do it, but we're going to start going backwards if we don't.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate to invite someone from the town to our meeting next Tuesday to explain what that growth number is? I've tried to obtain it myself, and it seems like a moving target. If that's something you'd be amenable to, I'm happy to make that call. And
The tax assessor?
whoever it may be.
That's who
I think it's the tax assessor that does that.
it
Yeah.
is. Does he, well, we could at least get his preliminary numbers, maybe.
Sure. If
Yeah.
you'd like.
Okay. Mrs. Pavo, anything?
I like that idea. At least we have somewhat of an idea where we stand as far as growth. Sarah, at least we would have some idea of where we stand, and maybe it's going to be on the high end this year compared to years previously.
So when the tax base grows, it means we have more properties to spend out the tax burden on, which means everybody's rate goes down.
And I think that that's not likely, but definite.
I think there's a fair chance.
A fair chance,
Fair
okay.
chance is better than.
And that's
none.
outside of the casino revenue and the,
It is, and I don't think for 1 minute we ever expected that our school budget request was ever to come from casino revenue.
No,
That seems to be a
no, we know.
misnomer out there. You know, understanding that the town is expecting to see tax revenue growth this year, and the fact that we have not asked the citizens of Tiverton for an increase in 2 years, and indeed, we haven't received any increases from the town in several years now.
So one of the issues here actually is who sets policy and who ultimately, what decides what's best for the children and the families and the town as a whole. And it was pretty clear to me, if you parse the votes of at least 4 of the budget committee members, their concern was that we had given the teachers a raise of 3%, and then 3.5% and 3.5% for a total of 10 over the 3-year contract. My understanding, or I believe that the school committee should be setting policy, not the budget committee. The budget committee, I think, should be determining if the budget is fiscally sound and can be supported by the town. And I don't think there was actually any question on the part of the budget committee that that wasn't the case. The concern of the chair was that any casino money be used for labor. The concern of one of the other members was that the contract had been irresponsibly negotiated, although I'll note that he did not attend any of the meetings at which we discussed any of those contract negotiations, both in an open session, nor did he choose to contact any of us about his concerns as a sitting member of the budget committee. So I think that ultimately we have to set aside the decision of the majority of the budget committee, because I don't think it's, while it may be legal, that it's not really legitimate, and that we should really let the voters decide whether or not our requested budget is the appropriate budget for the schools, that it will support the contract we negotiated with NEA, it will support the contract we negotiated with Council 94, it will support the needs of the district, and will get us closer to being able to budget or to balance our budgets for fiscal year 20 and 21.
that's the big thing for me. It will get us closer
Yeah,
to balance
I
our budget. We are so out of balance right now, and
It's almost irresponsible for us not to ask for
Exactly.
help to get where we need to go.
Well, and to let the
because to
people decide.
Manny's point, we're going to get to a point where, okay, now we need a
And-
10% increase, or we're
Yeah,
shuttling.
You don't want to do that.
And I don't disagree
You know?
with the
Whatever
assertion
that
that the fund balance should be used to balance what we need to balance. However, we're gonna be doing that anyway, even if we put forward an alternative budget, or an optional budget, as it's termed in the charter clause.
Yeah.
We will still be drawing down significantly from any fund balance we have. The only thing it will allow us to do is to not draw it down as much, so that we can still maintain those reserves, hopefully at some level, that if we are hit with unexpected expenses, as we must note, we were by $500,000 just in out of district placements this year, and those are expected to be recurrent expenses, that we will be able to buffer the town actually from having to draw from the reserve fund of the town.
And when it's in your budget, now you can count on it. That's the big thing, is we can count on it.
Dr. Larkin,
Yes, Mrs. Black.
I just like to make sure when we, if and when we do it, we make sure we do it exactly the way it has to be
Well,
done.
Correct.
So someone doesn't throw it back on us and say, and
So-
we end up in court again, municipal
Right.
court. I don't like going to
So
court.
I guess that's sort of what we need to think about, probably don't need to decide tonight, but do we want to put in our own, which we can do by right as a board? Or there are probably citizens that are going to put alternatives on that may take up our case? I don't know.
Well, however it's done, and it's.
However it's done,
We want to
yeah.
make sure, the whole docket's prepared and all that.
And I hate to ask Councilor DiMederos to come up and explain anything. I know she's just a guest here this evening.
I'm your liaison from now on.
She is.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
That was
Did
one
we
of
have
my
one before you?
announcements.
I think so.
What do you want to, about,
The question I have is if we were to decide to place an optional budget request,
by right?
that speaks to our needs as the school department. What of the municipal side? How does
Yeah.
that work?
I don't remember what the
So
charter says.
that was the whole problem.
That was the problem.
Right, and that's what I want to hear about. If
So-
you can, off the top of your head, because you're an expert.
No, because it got, well,
No.
feel
so-
free.
Yeah.
Let us know.
But it's a discussion we have to
So here
have.
we come, and
You
we
can include our budget, but you have to include the budget that we gave to the budget committee.
That's right.
You can't change our
That's
budget.
So it's
right.
not the
No, no.
budget committee's approved?
No.
No, it's the one that
It's the
the one that
original
Justin Katz
submitted.
submitted to the budget committee, quite frankly. So it's
Okay.
that budget.
That's
So
right.
That's the one that you have to, as a school committee. Like other people can change our budget. Like,
Just like they can change ours.
yeah, any petitioner can come in and give you whatever they feel you need and whatever we need, what they feel
But
we
if
need.
we do it
But if
officially-
you do it, and same thing with us,
It's
if we
tagged
decided,
with the
right,
original
if we
submission.
decided to change our budget, we have to put what you submitted to the school, to the budget
We
committee.
can't alter it.
Think about that.
So that was the problem.
We can't change your budget in any way.
Right.
And that was the problem last
Right.
time.
So we
So
actually.
that's why a petitioner had to do it.
Right, because we actually wanted to decrease our budget by $14,000
And they wouldn't let us.
because
They
we,
wouldn't let
you know,
us.
again, the numbers are fluid. Our Director of Finance and Administration said, well, that account's a little bit more favorable. You can decrease your amount by $14,000. And we felt that,
But we couldn't submit that because you
no.
had already submitted
No,
it.
I
to-
know. And that's
Yeah.
why we got caught up in doing
That
a
was the
petitioner's budget.
whole problem.
Because the interpretation of the solicitor, and it was really just the solicitor's interpretation, was that you had to submit the budget you had given to the budget
same
committee.
number.
Right, and we've had other opinions on that, and it seems to be that the chart is very vague about it. It doesn't.
It is,
it
but
doesn't-
I guess that's the kind of the latest one
But
we
because
have,
it doesn't
so
say you can change our budget, it has to be
the
assumed you
prevailing.
can't.
But we couldn't change ours
But we
either.
can change,
No.
but they said we couldn't change ours last
Right.
time.
No, you couldn't
No, we
change.
could have changed ours, but
No,
we had to.
No.
Well, that's because they were going to submit.
That's because we were going to submit
Submit.
it. But if you submit it, you can change yours.
No, Jerry, you and I.
Not according to Mr. DeSisto at the
no,
time.
No, quite frankly, I went over this all today.
Okay.
And I looked at all the deadlines, and I looked who could do what when. And that's not how we interpreted it.
So it's,
So if you
want to submit a budget, we just have to take your original submission.
you have
and
to
it be
take
paired
our
with it.
original, but the reason why you would submit a budget was because you want
To change
Our
our
to
original
change your
request.
budget.
Yeah, why else
Yeah.
would you submit?
Right.
Yeah, that
Right.
like
Right.
makes no sense.
Right.
And that's by the 11th, right? Us?
It's
Although
the
in
11th.
this
Yours
year, it
has
would
to
be
be
the
by-
same thing.
Yours,
When?
I think it's the 10th, Sally, because I did the dates today.
10th.
I think it's the 10th.
We have to do it by the
But you
10th.
don't have to have any petitioner signatures or anything like
No.
that.
Right.
A petitioner budget has to be submitted by the 20th.
20th, okay.
And that budget has to come in with the 50 signatures.
Right.
And I did go through this process today because, quite frankly, I've been doing this forever and it's still vague to me.
It is, yeah.
And every year I have to have it
I mean,
reinforced.
this year, it would be one and the same.
So Jerry,
We
what
wouldn't
you-
want to change it. It would be our original submission anyway.
Original one, yeah.
It usually would be, right? If
the
you
most
really-
part.
But
Well,
I
even
understand
if-
what happened that year.
Even a petition, yeah, I know. We could probably just stop talking
So,
about
yeah,
that.
so, all right. So we
so
need to decide if we're going to do
the-
it that way or.
A petitioner's budget that was actually over ours would need an override because it'd be over 4%.
No, I
A
No.
petitioner's
No.
budget could go any between what the
No.
budget committee is offering you and what
No,
you
that's true.
you
And the
want.
Scott.
So it could be
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
middle
Okay,
budget. It could
yep.
be whatever. That petitioner's budget could be any number, and we know that from past experience. It doesn't even have to make sense. It can be any number. Really, I'm sorry. I'm really up to here
The
with this whole
four-
thing lately.
the four-
But no, it doesn't even have. Whatever the petitioner can come in, and we've seen it. Give $1 to you and $1 to
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
and it's okay.
Yep.
A petitioner budget doesn't have to have any really
Yeah, there are no restrictions on a petition.
no restrictions whatsoever. But we do have some restrictions. But you can't control our budget and,
Right.
and
Well,
vice
that's good,
versa.
yeah.
And it's kind of a little ridiculous, but that's the way it goes.
And our 4% cap is different than the town's 4% cap. The school's 4% cap is based upon
On the
the
local
prior
levy.
year municipal. The town's 4% cap is based on the levy.
Right.
Which is going to be very different this year because you've got increased revenue and increased tax base.
Yes, yes.
Well,
So-
that's what's being argued right now everywhere.
Oh, really? It's being argued?
Well,
Really? We hadn't
it's
heard.
being argued that the numbers aren't making a lot of sense, but it seems like our numbers are a little lower.
Do the
I don't
numbers ever make
understand.
sense? Okay.
They
But-
will by Thursday.
But you're right. In any event, they could be illegal and they would still go on.
Oh, yeah. We've seen it. We've seen it.
I just
Yeah.
want to make sure
Thank
our
you.
number's legal. That's
Yes.
all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but you rose to the
And
occasion.
welcome as our liaison. We
That was my announcement for
love
later.
having
She
you as
just
a
got
friendly
appointed.
face.
So it sounds like, yes, the consensus is we need the responsible thing is to at least,
Yeah, and I think
how we do it is questioned, but we need to ask for the alternate because, as Peter so succinctly said, that doesn't even get us halfway to our deficit, but it will at least get,
And I think we
Still
need
more
to
than
ask
beginning.
for guidance from our attorney and from the Board of Canvassers exactly what
I don't
we-
think you're going to get it from the Board of Canvassers. They're not going to be able to meet before next week.
Okay,
So I think we're just going to
Yeah,
have to do the
all right.
best we can.
okay. Then I suggest that we actually ask Dr. Sanquioni to contact our council as well to at least interpret the charter for us.
He did last time.
So much to
No, well,
He did, and then it went to court and it got thrown out.
We're still paying.
no. We should stop talking about
Yes.
that, but,
In any event. So the question for us is, do we want to do it on our own by right and have to tag it with the original submitted council budget? Or do we want to try to tag on to someone who may or may not be submitting a petitioner budget, and I don't even know if anyone is?
Right.
So,
I would like for us to wait until a little closer to the deadline.
well, that's only next
pretty
Tuesday.
It is
close.
next week, but we do have another meeting between now and then.
all right.
Agree.
So, yeah, I think certainly we will have this on our agenda for next week and we can make a final decision then.
Any thoughts
Does-
on that, guys, at all?
Yeah, any members of the
Petitioner
public wish
budget,
to?
doing it ourselves, making,
ask
the last thing I want to do is confuse people. I mean, we have a lot of support, I don't want to split it, I don't want to make it more confusing, this whole process is so confusing to begin with. Hi, Mike,
Hi, is this open mic night?
it is.
And you are who?
Michael Dakotas, 19 Louise Drive, taxpayer. So my feedback would be, as someone that was on the budget committee last year, we didn't have anything more than a dollar more to do anything with the school. So I don't want to say the word easy, but there was no choice. I would
Straightforward.
pretty straightforward. We want a dollar more, you get a dollar more. This year being a little different, I think the suggestion I would give is I think there are people that are willing to put in an alternate budget to do the work on it. I think the lesson learned for me last year was fighting for a budget that the Budget Committee was able to pass and get through in the FTR, which got approved, was that if the opposition, I'll say, was to put something in, I think you need to have it somewhat close but not too far away, if that makes sense. So if I remember last year there was maybe, how many % difference in the budgets? Anyone remember? Less than 1%? 30-cent different? 40 cents different last year?
Yeah.
So able to spin it to the public that this isn't much of a difference?
So are people talking about an alternate budget already? We are not really, it's too soon.
I would say the answer would be yes.
Okay, okay.
I mean, I dressed my best to come here tonight. Didn't know I was going to do it, but I wanted to show some support. I wish I could be on the Budget Committee to support you, but I'm not. But I would tell you, as someone
Soon.
in the public eye, that I know there will be people that will do their best to support not only the town but the school. And I think the only caution I would use is what Dr. Larkin already said. If you keep spending down what you have, a group would make you spend it to nothing. And I think at some point you have to draw the line, and you have to put your gloves on and fight for what you believe in. So there's people that will back you.
Okay.
That's
Thank
just
you.
my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. So
Could I just, before we wrap this up, I guess, I also wanted to call attention to a few facts that are, I'd like to put out there to counter some of the narrative that's been happening. You know, indeed, I've seen people claim that the school budget is 80% of the town's total budget, and that's just simply not true. It's more in the area of 60%, which is entirely appropriate for the largest employer in the town and the caretaker of the education of our children.
That's
It
true
is
of every
substantial.
municipality in the United States.
It sure is. It's substantial, but it's not 80%. Absolutely. You know, then there's been, I know from the Budget Committee in particular, there was criticism that we haven't handled every single construction need that we have in that bond, which was meant specifically for heating systems and roofs on 2 very old buildings. And the decision to do that actually increased the lifespan of those 2 buildings to save us from having to build an $80 million school. So, you know, it's something to be reminded of. You know, the lights and the ceiling tiles that we pulled from our fund balance, we actually got that at a substantial discount because the contractors were already here working on the roofs, if you recall, when we voted on that. We had significant savings by doing it while the hood was up, if you will. You know, there are any number of additional projects. Dr. Larkin, I'm sure you could tell us, right? 25 million or so? I mean, you know, these schools are not...
Depends on who you ask, but yes, $45 million according to RIDE, $25 million according to our facility study that's now 5 years old.
Yeah, I mean, there are still so many capital needs that we have that we're not even scratching the surface right now, and we're going to have to continue to fight for this every single year. You know, and then the accusation that we, as a school committee and a school department, are sitting on slush funds is just utterly ridiculous. We have our fund balance. It's been well known for some time now. We have this Medicaid balance that we're luckily going to be able to use to help us get through this unexpected increase in special ed costs. You know, we have a town audit every year that clearly states all the funds that are available to us from a federal and state perspective. Our state aid is known every year. There's nothing hidden. You know, I wish I could say there was, but there just isn't. You know, and then lastly, we really do try our best to be fiscally responsible as a group here. You know, we do question, we do try our best to submit an accurate budget, but, you know, going back to a point that Mrs. Palash has raised several times, we're looking at a projection that goes out 1.5 years. when we submit it. There's so many things that can change from the time you initially put that budget projection together to when the expenses are going to hit. And it's, it's just something with the way that this whole FTR is set up that we're required to do it so early. And it just makes it that much more difficult, right? It's $30 million budget. You can't pin it to the penny every year. There's always going to be some plus and minus. We do our best. Dr. Sanquioni and his team are doing their best. We're not trying to take money or steal money from the taxpayers of Tiverton. On the contrary, our goal here is simply to provide the best education we can to the children of Tiverton. And you know what? They're our future. If we can't support them, what are we doing? That's all I have.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Sanford Mantel, Budway, Tiverton. Question, what will the fund balance be at the end of this fiscal year?
Approximately $900,000.
I just want to clarify.
Am I correct in that, Dr.
Well,
Sanquioni?
that's the projected.
Yes.
Projected? All right.
For
So,
FY '20, you mean?
no, for this fiscal year, in other words, when you
So
end
on
the year,
July 1st or?
July 1st, yeah.
About $900,000.
Okay. Now, another question I have, your worst case scenario.
Actually, that's not,
I think it's a little higher than that,
it's
Jerry.
2 million, and then have a FY '20 projected commitment and shortfall of 928, which takes it down to the 980s.
Wait, 2 million, is that,
Uncommitted,
uncommitted?
of 2 million. We've projected about 928 to be spent in FY '20, which would have an FY '20 balance of 983, correct?
He's looking at this,
He's asking for FY '19, second
so
line,
that's what he wants.
What you end with this fiscal year.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
about
Uncommitted.
983.
No. I
Yep.
mean, understand, we have committed monies that we.
Over and above that.
Yes, because we've spent about 2 million of it, and then another bunch of it is still
Okay.
committed, so
All right.
yes.
So my other question is, the $500,000 cut that you'll have to make, does that force you to bump up against class size issues with the union constraints in terms of average class? I think it was at 25 or 28?
If you start to go into personnel cuts, you can get into that.
You might bump up against that.
Yes,
Okay.
very well likely.
Okay. Now, the 31,947 that you proposed to the Budget Committee, how much, in addition to that, will you have to take out of the fund balance? You need 31,947. The town is going to fund you the 20.
1.4, is that the number, Peter?
1.4. That's coming from Medicaid and FY.
Or go back.
No, so I think you're talking about our proposed budget and
Right,
the.
31,947, which is what you originally, not,
Right, and then on top of it, we have to take 478, 496 from the fund balance, 496 from Medicaid drawdown, and we have to take another 200 from our fund balance. This is FY '20.
But I think you're saying, what's the delta between what the budget committee gave us and what
well, the
our
delta's about
request?
$500,000.
Yeah,
He knows
okay.
that.
Oh,
He's
okay.
saying
I know
above-
that. No,
He's
I-
saying above and beyond that.
Above and beyond, oh, I
beyond,
see.
you need
Yeah,
another 1.474 million
correct.
over the 31,947,
Yes,
which you're going to be drawing down from your fund balances.
correct.
And
From
after
our
all
fund
this, I'm
balance.
just trying to clarify this for
Yep.
here, but mostly for people at home that are watching, because,
So
so,
there's from our fund balances, and then there's a one-time 300,000 IDEA grant drawdown. So everything in red is where there'll be our one-time drawdowns.
but again, it's a total of 1.474,
Yep.
right? Okay, over and above the 31,940s, okay. So really, it's really not 31,947, it's 31,947 plus the 1,474.
Yes.
Correct.
In reality.
So basically, again, out of
Just trying to
district.
clarify.
Yeah, no, I understand. So, and that's, I'm trying to gloss it a little bit. So, out of district placements went up by $500,000 unexpectedly. We had a structural.
Not a complaint, just trying to
Yeah,
clarify.
no, yeah.
Absolutely right, Sandy, yeah.
But you're right.
Okay, all right. So, okay, I think that's taking care of my question. Sorry, I had to get those things
Oh, that's
clarified.
fine.
Okay, thank
Anything
you.
else, let us know. Thank you. And I think that was what we were saying, is that was sort of the, that was sort of the point that got lost somewhere along the way.
Right.
Is the 31,947 was just personnel increases, any kind of transportation increases,
And special ed increase
special ed, yeah, that.
to the max. to
Right,
the
but it
4%.
didn't include these
Well, and the drawdown we took
drawdowns.
for FY19 last year, when we went in for 0,
Well, that's, you see the effect of
Yeah,
that here.
that's the 478 essentially. All right. Is that clear to everybody?
And the 31,947
It
is
takes
the
me
max
forever
we
to-
could ask for. We could not ask for any more. So we couldn't have went in asking for 31,947 plus the 1.5. We couldn't. We're like, state law prohibits us from asking for any more than,
We
do you
will
mean?
be.
Which one, 478?
what?
From your fund balance, with your original budget, being the
Yes.
increase you have.
Yes.
We're taking that money.
Yes, we were.
Yes.
We have to because we couldn't ask for any more.
I don't know if that's clear.
Ah, yeah. No, this has to come from somewhere, no matter
Right.
what.
Right,
Right.
right. Because,
So it'll
What
be,
I'm saying is you're not saving this money by asking for it.
no.
nope. No, thank you.
No, we're
Thank you, Denise.
getting closer to covering structural deficits that we have because of a lot of different reasons.
Mr. Chair, maybe another way to say it is, you know, that 1.47 was baked into the $31 million budget that we were asking for originally. You haven't addressed the $500,000 in cuts yet. Like, there has to be, if that budget that was proposed Thursday evening becomes reality, there's going to be another slide that's showing you $500,000 in cuts, in addition to that.
And that's a conversation we'll have if.
Right.
Right.
Right, so we may be saying, okay, now we have 500, now how are we going to cover that?
You haven't covered it yet, right?
Because we haven't covered it
Right.
yet. We
Right.
knew we were going to have to cover this because we just could not ask for any more than we did. But now, on top of that, we have to figure out where that 500,000 is going to come from. And we can't say it enough. 2021 is going to be a disaster because it's like, okay, now still got all of our expenses and we've drawn down all our revenue.
And I'm also concerned about state aid.
I am too. And I think Mr. Karen, he said that several times.
What?
You guys are creating a structural deficit.
Yeah, he saw it right
He
through it.
knows what we're doing.
No.
He understands it better probably than most. And I think the hope, I don't want to use hope, that's probably, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I certainly think the direction is if you create a structural deficit and we draw down all these revenues, we will be to a point where, to Manny's point, we either have to ask for a huge increase from the town or we have to make cuts. That's it. That's all you're left with. And that will rear its head in 2021.
Mr. Chairman, one other point. As far as the FTR, depending on how many budgets go onto the ballot, the winning budget has to have 50%?
Yep.
Or it goes to
Yep.
a second ballot?
So it goes to a runoff,
It goes to a runoff. The top two
like
would go
the
to
following
runoff.
Saturday, I think.
Manny, good times.
Okay, so that's
Right.
the other complication
So
that
if-
comes in with all this.
So, you know, if you could, if you were Machiavellian, you could submit 20 different petitioners' budget, all which were $1 off from each other, $100 off from each other, and try and
Try to
split the
spread
vote
it.
of the opposition. So any budget that, so say there are 5 budgets on the ballot, the 2 top would then go to a runoff, I think it's the following Saturday, I forget what the charter exactly says, but it's something like that.
I just want to end again, I just want to, because Sally, it's just ringing in my ears, Sally. And I just want to say it again because you said it so well. 5 years, we weren't asking for anything from the taxpayers. We were doing our very best during those years when we were being asked to be frugal, when we were being asked to take our taxpayers into consideration. And now we need it. Now we need our taxpayers to come to the table and help, and help give our kids what they need this year. And it's not going to hurt anybody. We have tax-based growth. We have new revenue in town. To quote Dr. Sanquioni, it can be a win-win. So
Any other questions or comments? Then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.